How the FBI Created Terrorists. That's the subtitle of a new exposé in the Intercept by Trevor Aaronson, a journalist who investigates the FBI's use of informants in sting operations. The article tells the story of Sami Osmakac, a mentally disturbed, financially unstable young man who was targeted by an elaborately orchestrated FBI sting in early 2012. The operation involved a paid informant who hired Osmakac for a job when he was too broke to afford inert government weapons. The FBI provided the weapons seen in a so-called martyrdom video Osmakac filmed before he planned to deliver what he believed was a car bomb to a bar in Tampa, Florida. His family believes he never would have initiated such a plot without the FBI, and transcripts of conversations obtained by Aaronson show FBI agents appeared to agree. The transcripts show how the agents worked to get $500 to him so he could make a down payment on the weapons, something government prosecutors wanted to prove their case. This is part of an exchange between Special Agent Richard Worms and Special Agent Jacob Collins.
This poor guy, he gets almost $500 in his hand tomorrow, and he says, "You need me for another week. That's $1,000. Why wouldn't he show up?"
Well, right. But you're a hard-working, logical human being.
No, I'm trying to think. If I'm a retarded fool who is hard up for money, and I don't have a pot to in, another $500 looks pretty good.
That was part of a conversation between FBI Special Agents Richard Worms and Jacob Collins, referring to Sami Osmakac as a, quote, retarded fool in the lead-up to his arrest. In November 2014, he was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison, despite a court-appointed psychologist diagnosing him with schizoaffective disorder. Well, for more, we're joined now by two guests. In Tampa, Florida, we're joined by Avni Osmakac, the older brother of Sami. And we're joined by Trevor Aaronson, a contributing writer at The Intercept and executive director of the nonprofit Florida Center for Investigative Reporting. Trevor's the author of The Terror Factory Inside the FBI's Manufactured War on Terrorism, his most recent piece in The Intercept called The Sting, How the FBI Created a Terrorist. He's joining us from Vancouver, Canada, where he delivered a TED Talk this week on Sami Osmakac. Democracy Now! Invited a spokesperson from the FBI to join us on the show, but the agency declined. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Trevor, let's begin with you. Lay out this story.
Well, what's particularly interesting about this case is that this is a rare, if first ever, look at behind the scenes of a counterterrorism sting operation. And organizations like Human Rights Watch have often criticized these types of sting operations for targeting mentally ill, economically desperate people who on their own would not have the means to commit this type of crime. And these transcripts, the sealed transcripts that we obtained that were the accidentally recorded conversations among FBI agents as they were working the sting, certainly suggests that the FBI seems to agree with groups like Human Rights Watch, that in the case of Sami Osmakac at least, they didn't think he was capable of committing significant violence. You know, as the transcripts you showed earlier demonstrated, they thought he was a retarded fool. They describe his plot as wishy-washy and a pipe dream scenario. And, you know, the transcripts also show that they went to enormous lengths to put money in Sami Osmakac's hands, to basically funnel money through an informant who would then give it to Sami Osmakac so that Sami Osmakac could then purchase weapons from an undercover agent, which was something that the federal government insisted, federal prosecutors insisted they needed to show Osmakac's capacity for this type of crime. But obviously he didn't have that type of capacity. And so what these transcripts show, which are transcripts that a federal judge and the FBI never wanted released, they show that they went to an enormous length to orchestrate, and that's their word, orchestrate a situation where Sami Osmakac would be given money to then purchase weapons, and so he could be essentially kind of created as a terrorist in this FBI sting operation.
Where does the Hollywood ending come in?
So as this sting was progressing, the FBI squad supervisor, Richard Worms, was talking to his agents about discussions he was having with federal prosecutors. And he described how federal prosecutors wanted a Hollywood ending to their sting operation. What's particularly troublesome about that terminology, I think, is that it clearly shows that the FBI was not only controlling every aspect of the sting operation, but they were controlling it in such a way that they wanted a splashy ending, a Hollywood ending, as he says. And they essentially got a Hollywood ending. They were able to get Sami Osmakac to record a so-called martyrdom video in which he's wearing a suicide vest and has an AK-47 leaned up against a closet door behind him, all of which were provided by the FBI. And at the very end, they get him to attempt to deliver a car bomb, which was, of course, provided by the FBI. And as he backs out of a hotel parking lot, the car bomb in his trunk, FBI agents rush in and arrest him, and they essentially got their Hollywood ending. What's concerning, I think, is that this isn't the only case where a Hollywood ending has occurred. Sami Osmakac is one of more than 175 so-called terrorists since 9/11 who've been caught in these types of sting operations, and you could certainly make a strong argument that in each of these sting operations, the FBI has created a Hollywood ending like we saw in Osmakac's case.
Why did they target him?
It's still unclear exactly why they targeted him. According to the FBI's official story on this, Osmakac happened to go into a Middle Eastern market that was run by an informant, a man named Abdul Dabous. And Dabous claimed that Osmakac asked him if he had al-Qaeda flags. In turn, Dabous then called the FBI, and they launched a sting operation against him. And that was the beginning of the operation, according to the government. Sami Osmakac denies that he ever asked anyone for an al-Qaeda flag. And certainly there's questions about how FISA evidence was used and whether the government may have used surveillance before the introduction of the informant. That is to say, that before he met Dabous, the informant, did the government know or somehow want to target Sami Osmakac? And there are certainly suggestions along that line. I mean, it certainly is miraculous that Sami Osmakac would travel 45 minutes from his home and meet someone who just so happens to be an FBI informant and then target him. But to make clear, the government in the trial never was able to provide any evidence that Sami Osmakac had any connections to international terrorist groups. There was nothing in the record to suggest that he was on the verge of an attack. He had connections to people who could help him with an attack. This was, at best, an idea, and an idea that was manipulated by the government through an FBI informant and an undercover agent. And in the end, the capacity for that idea, all of the weapons, all of the money was provided by the FBI in this very elaborately orchestrated sting
I want to
operation.
turn to Avni Osmakac, who's joining us from Tampa. What do you want people to understand about your brother's case?
Well, I just want to make clear that whatever the government is playing in the media and everything is going on, this has been orchestrated by the government. They want you to see this. Behind the scenes, there's 128 agents working on this, informants and everything. All the YouTube videos and everything been orchestrated by the government. The same day my brother was arrested, the next day, the guy that's holding the camera and everything behind, they all disappeared. There's been multiple informants. The next day, they disappeared and nobody knew what was going on. During the trial, they were denying that Russell was an informant. But in the sentencing, one of the agents slipped and said they know exactly where he was and they know his location. And then our lawyer asked him, so does that mean that he's working for you? And their response was, that's national security. We cannot discuss this with you guys. So I know for a fact, I've been saying it since day one. This was an FBI sting, FBI entrapment. Since day one, it came to the media. And I just want people to wake up and see this is not the first time it's happened. It just happened in Ohio again. It happened in New York a couple of weeks ago with the 3 guys. This has been going on, and they're targeting people that are going through their own challenges.
Avni, we're going to have to leave it there, but we're going to continue this discussion right after the show and post it at democracynow.org. Avni Osmakac and Trevor Aaronson, thanks. Now, Trevor, let's begin with you. Lay out this story.
Right. Sami Osmakac's case is not unlike the cases of many other men who've been caught in these types of sting operations. Sami Osmakac was mentally ill. He had schizoaffective disorder, which meant he had trouble distinguishing between reality and fantasy. And he's not unique. There was a case in Seattle, for example, involving 2 men, a man named Abu Khalid Abdul Latif and Wali Mujahid, who were targeted by an informant in a sting operation in which they plotted to attack a military recruiting station outside Seattle. Both Abdul Latif and Mujahid were mentally ill. Mujahid, in fact, also had schizoaffective disorder, and they were convicted. Actually, they ended up pleading guilty for their role in that plot, which was led by an informant who, it's worth noting, was a convicted rapist and child molester. In Sami Osmakac's case, he was targeted by an informant who then passed him over to an undercover agent, and like the men in Seattle and the dozens of others who've been caught in these sting operations, didn't have the means or the opportunity to commit this type of crime. Nevertheless, the government has a near-perfect record of conviction in these types of cases, and Sami was the 12th person to argue entrapment at trial following one of these terrorism sting operations. He was unsuccessful, as have been the 11 others who have come before him and made that argument. The problem for many people charged in these types of cases is that the government has a really low bar in arguing against entrapment. That is to say, they can make the case that someone like Sami Osmakac was predisposed to commit the crime. And if you're predisposed to commit the crime, the entrapment defense can no longer apply. And juries are willing to accept as evidence of predisposition things like watching an extremist video or going to the mosque more frequently, as in the FBI's claims, which indicates a greater level of extremism. And these types of First Amendment protected activities are what the government is able to use to suggest that someone like Sami Osmakac, who didn't have any weapons, who didn't have any money, who didn't have any connections to international terrorist groups, is nevertheless somehow predisposed to commit this type of crime. And because the courts have not pushed back on these cases, because there's a near perfect record of conviction, and because there's very little oversight, congressional oversight of these types of tactics by the FBI has learned that this is kind of a tried and true tactic that it can use. And what we see is the use of these tactics in field office after field office after field office, with agents running these cases, getting promoted, informants working these cases, making lots of money, and there's perverse incentives along the lines for the FBI to build more and more cases, despite the fact that there's a real growing chorus of criticism coming from people like me and groups like Human Rights Watch that these cases are not really catching truly dangerous people so much as they're nabbing mentally ill and economically desperate people who can easily be manipulated by government agents.
I want to turn to another part of the FBI recordings in this case. This is part of the conversation between Special Agent Taylor Reed and Special Agent Jacob Collins.
The gun charge is weak, but multiple explosive devices would be big, really big. So if he wears one, that's a much bigger charge than the one device or one gun. And I'm wondering if we can keep him, scare him away from the guns by saying, dude, you know you can't give me anything. Your buddy doesn't have a lot of money. You guys can't afford a gun. But with the money you have, I can get you several explosives. I can get you a vest with 4 grenades.
Yeah, but that was an initial request with the source. He wanted to buy 2 AKs, nothing at all about explosives in every pipe dream scenarios he's had since then.
How do we come up with enough money for them to pay for everything?
So that clip between Special Agent Taylor Reed and Special FBI Agent Jacob Collins. Trevor Aaronson, if you could talk about the significance of what they are saying.
Well, first of all, this clearly shows that the FBI is controlling every aspect of the sting operation. And for the purposes of kind of persuading a future jury to convict someone like Sami Osmakac, they would have a much better case and much better sentencing guidelines to work with if they could get Sami Osmakac to use an explosive device versus a gun, such as an AK-47. And in this exchange, what you're clearly seeing is the FBI essentially orchestrating a situation that would allow Sami Osmakac to have an explosive vest and have a bomb, which in the government's view would make the prosecution of their case much, much easier. And what you're also seeing is an attempt to satisfy prosecutors who had told them that they wanted Sami to pay for these weapons. The problem, of course, that Sami was broke. He had no money. He had no transportation. In fact, the government had to give him money to put a car battery in his car so he could get to where they wanted him to go. And yet in these conversations, the government is not only orchestrating the types of weapons he will have, the types of weapons that will be most beneficial for their prosecution, but also orchestrating a situation that would allow Sami to have money to pay for those weapons, essentially using government weapons to purchase, government money to purchase government weapons, and then blaming Sami for it and prosecuting him for it as part of a conspiracy.
Avni Osmakac, talk about the toll this case has taken on your family.
Well, ever since this happened, we have a little business in St. Petersburg, Florida. Everybody is just scared, and our family's scared to even go out there because ever since this happened, multiple times they broke into the business. We have gotten death threats letters and everything else. We sold our house to get a lawyer, to raise money for the lawyers. Now everything that went down, we pretty much spend all the money that we can, and we really looking for somebody that can help us to raise some money to get a lawyer for his appeal and everything. And there's really nothing else we can say about this. I just want people to understand that everything that's going on with these cases, the government is doing all these things, and they want you to be scared when they see these videos, and even the cameras holding the camera, the government is doing all this. And they need to understand there's no terrorism going on in the United States without the government's help or without the government knowing about it.
Can you talk, Avni, about Sami's state of mind, about his mental health?
Well, ever since late 2009, we came back from a European trip. He's changed because we had the disturbance in the plane. And we thought, me and him were in that plane, I thought we really were going to crash and die. And ever since then, he's been very isolated. He started isolating from his friends, his family. He met this guy at the mosque, Russell Dennison, who calls himself Abdullah. But to this day, I know he's an agent. And ever since being around him changed the way he talked, thought, dressed. He wouldn't sleep. His color was, he was always pale. He wasn't wanting to do anything.
Well, Trevor Aaronson, can you talk about who the informant was?
So the informant was a man named Abdul Dabous, and Dabous was a well-known businessman in the Tampa community, and in fact was an associate of Sami Al-Arian, who was the University of South Florida professor who was charged under the Patriot Act and just recently accepted deportation to Turkey. Abdul Dabous was well known in the Tampa community and ran a Middle Eastern market in Tampa, Florida. What I discovered through records was that he was also in rough financial straits when he worked this operation with the FBI. His house was under foreclosure proceedings. His business was under foreclosure proceedings. He owed money around town according to civil complaints that had been filed against him. And the FBI gave him $20,000 to participate in this plot. You know, it's worth noting, I think, that money is often the common motivator for FBI informants. And although Dabous, in my interview with him in Gaza, which is where he now is, says he wasn't motivated by money, his financial circumstances, such as they were when he met Sami Osmakac, that he was under multiple foreclosures and owed money across town, certainly suggested that $20,000 would have gone a long way. And that's not an unusual situation for informants.
Trevor, you're saying that Abdul Rauf Dabous is in Gaza now?
He's in Gaza now. After Sami Osmakac was arrested, Abdul Dabous went to Gaza. He says he's receiving treatment there for cancer. That's something I can verify. That's his claim. And because he was in Gaza, the government did not produce him as a witness in Sami Osmakac's trial. He neither provided testimony in the trial or any sort of deposition, which, to my knowledge, is really the first time one of these counterterrorism sting operations has gone to trial, and an informant, especially an informant who is so closely tied to the sting operation, was not required by the judge to be a witness at the trial.
Who is Russell Dennison, Trevor?
Russell Dennison is a pretty mysterious guy. It's clear from Sami's story that Russell Dennison was there as kind of Sami's turn toward extremism began. And it was Russell Dennison, who is an American-born convert to Islam, who had encouraged Sami to post YouTube videos in which they, ranted about non-believers, and in some cases Sami would call, the leaders of the local Muslim communities derogatory names, and then rant even about their strong faith in Islam. What's interesting about Russell Dennison is that he miraculously takes Sami on a 45-minute drive to meet Abdul Dabous, the informant who worked the sting operation. And to this day, Sami doesn't know why he agreed to go on this ride. And to this day, he's not sure why Russell Dennison even wanted to go. But they went along, and when he gets to meet Abdul Dabous, Dabous offers him a job, and that's the beginning of the sting operation. What's really interesting about Russell Dennison, however, is that he was in contact with another person. I mentioned earlier in our interview a man named Abu Khalid Abdul Latif, who was a man who was targeted in a sting operation in Seattle. According to a confidential FBI file we obtained on Russell Dennison, after Osmakac's arrest, 2 FBI agents go and interview him, and he admits to them that he knows Abu Khalid Abdul Latif. It's fairly suspicious to me that a man living in Florida would know 2 people being targeted in FBI sting operations on opposite ends of the country, and that man just so happened to be the one who kind of miraculously delivers Sami Osmakac to the informant just as the government needs. So, as Avni mentioned, he and his family suspect that Russell Dennison was somehow working with the government in some capacity, and that he in turn was there to help deliver Sami Osmakac into the sting operation. The records I've received do not indicate either way whether Russell Dennison was working with the government. And after Sami Osmakac's arrest, he disappeared. There's some emails that suggest he's in Syria, but I really don't know where he is at this time.
Avni, what would have happened, do you think, if your brother Sami had gotten mental health help?
Well, I know other people that have mental health issues, and we have mental people in my family that have mental issues. They got prescription medication, they went to see psychiatrists, and they're fine, they're living with it. I know if the government would have never got involved, he would have never even thought about any crimes. Before all this happened, he never committed a crime at all. Ever since the government got involved, he became so outspoken. He was a shy guy who was training with an ex-Secret Service person to become a kickboxer. This is before he became sick. So I know for a fact he would never be able to do any of the crimes that the government is claiming. There's never been in his ideas to do any crime because that's not us. I have 7 other siblings. Nobody ever has committed a crime, period.
Well, I want to thank you both for being with us. Avni Osmakac will continue to follow the case of your brother Sami. And I want to thank you, Trevor Aaronson, for being with us. We will link to your piece at The Intercept at democracynow.org. The piece is called The Sting, How the FBI Created a Terrorist.